Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone. It's Friday the 13th, and we also gather today for reading Srimad Bhagavatam, which dispels all the misfortune and brings the auspiciousness on whichever day you're reading and wherever you're reading, and whatever's on your mind, and in any circumstance, in anything, it brings all good, and all the answers are there hidden. So we're continuing reading where we left off, chapter 26 of the third canto, verse 62 today. We start from verse 62, and we recite a little prayer, or we sing a little prayer of glorification of this scripture. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhantna Ratnadya, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada, Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu, Kalidvanto Ditaditya, Shri Krishna Parivartita, Paramananda Patnaya, Prema Vakshaksharayate, Sarvanda Sarva Sivyaya, Shri Krishna Namostume, Madhika Bandho Matsangin, Madgaro Matmahadana, Manishtaraka Madbhagya, Madananda Namostute, Asadu Sadhu Tadai, Natini Chocha Taraka, Hana Muncha Kadachinmam, Premna Hrit Kantayospura. Translation: O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all of the worlds. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali, you are the exact image of Sri Krishna. I bow down to you who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me, always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So we continue reading today. We are just towards the end of chapter 26, which is entitled Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. But before we start today, I was just inspired to read a little bit from this book, which is Book Bhagavata, which was just released not long ago by compilation or condensed Bhagavatam by Sutapa Prabhu. So we just have this book on rent now. We don't have it available here yet. So we'll just read just where we are now. So just to refresh where we are, and it's really succinctly abbreviated here in this book. So it's just one paragraph. So where we are at the 26th, it's abbreviating the chapter 26, which is here entitled Material Nature. So I'll just read this. Kapila Deva began a technical explanation, so that's what we're hearing here, of material elements and energies of the Lord. Sankhya philosophy helps the living entity to cut his knot of attachment to the temporary world by breaking down the various constituents of material nature and removing its superficial allure. Although a devotee knows bhakti is supreme, he utilizes such philosophical analysis to fortify his detachment and disinterest in the objects of material enjoyment. Kapila Dev explained the union and interaction between the supreme enjoyer Purusha, material nature Prakriti, and the living being Jiva. He then delineated a breakdown of the elements of Prakriti, the universal egg and its various coverings, and then described the universal form. On a practical level, Kapila Dev discussed the qualities that one should cultivate for spiritual success, how to intensify one's spiritual practice, and the rarity of liberation and spiritual perfection. So this is just like a short summary, I would say, of what we are reading in this really condensed and really lovely presentation of Bhagavatam, which is full of which I really especially like, because it makes the book really more, let's say, with lots of lively, sort of say, with illustrations, of course, as we have before, but more so for me like this infographics. So infographics it's full of infographics that puts this philosophical concept onto page, onto sort of like craft in presentation, in visual presentation. So I really like this. It's kind of, if you're a more visual person, this also helps. Anyway, this book is out there. So we continue reading now from verse 62 of the chapter 26 of Canto 3. So translation and all translation and purports are by Srila Prabhupada. Translation: when the demigods and presiding deities of the various senses were thus manifested, they wanted to wake their origin of appearance. But upon failing to do so, they re-entered the body of the Virat Purusha one after another in order to wake him. Purport: in order to wake the sleeping deity controller within, one has to rechannel the sense activities from concentration on the outside to concentration inside. In the following verses, the sense activities which are required to wake the Virat Purusha will be explained very nicely. 63. Translation. You found where we are? Okay. It's 626, sorry, 326.63. Yeah. Okay. The god of fire entered his mouth with the organ of speech, but the Virat Purusha could not be aroused. Then the god of wind entered his nostrils with a sense of smell, but still the Virat Purusha refused to be awakened. 64. The sun god entered the eyes of the Virat Purusha with a sense of sight, but still the Virat Purusha did not get up. Similarly, the predominating deities of the directions entered through his ears with a sense of hearing, but still he did not get up. 65. The predominating deities of the skin, herbs, and seasoning plants entered the skin of the Virat Purusha with the hair of the body, but the cosmic being refused to get up even then. The god predominating over water entered his organ of generation with the faculty of procreation, but the Virat Purusha still would not rise. Text 66. The god of death entered his anus with the organ of defecation, but the Virat Purusha could not be spurred to activity. The god Indra entered the hands with their power of grasping and dropping things, but the Virat Purusha would not get up even then. 67. Lord Vishnu entered his feet with the faculty of locomotion, but the Virat Purusha refused to stand up even then. The rivers entered his blood vessels with the blood and the power of circulation, but still the cosmic being could not be made to stir. 68. The ocean entered his abdomen with hunger and thirst, but the cosmic being refused to rise even then. The moon god entered his heart with the mind, but the cosmic being would not be roused. Text 69. Brahma also entered his heart with intelligence, but even then the cosmic being could not be prevailed upon to get up. Lord Rudra also entered his heart with the ego, but even then the cosmic being did not stir. Text 70. However, when the inner controller, the deity presiding over consciousness, entered the heart with reason, at that very moment the cosmic being arose from the causal waters. 71. When a man is sleeping, all his material assets, namely the vital energy, the senses for recording knowledge, the senses for working, the mind and the intelligence, cannot arouse him. He can be aroused only when the Supersoul helps him. Purport. The explanation of Sankhya philosophy is described here in detail, in the sense that the Virat Purusha or the universal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the original source of all the various sense organs and their presiding deities. The relationship between the Virat Purusha and the presiding deities, or the living entities, is so intricate that simply by exercising the sense organs which are related to their presiding deities, the Virat Purusha cannot be aroused. It is not possible to arouse the Virat Purusha or to link with the Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead by material activities. Only by devotional service and detachment can one perform the process of linking with the Absolute, which is called yoga. Text 72. Therefore, through devotion, detachment, and advancement in spiritual knowledge acquired through concentrated devotional service, one should contemplate that Supersoul as present in this very body, although simultaneously apart from it. Purport. One can realize the Supersoul within oneself. He is within one's body, but apart from the body, or transcendental to the body. Although sitting in the same body as the individual soul, the Supersoul has no affection for the body, whereas the living soul does. One has to detach himself, therefore, from this material body by discharging devotional service. It is clearly mentioned here, bhaktya, that one has to execute devotional service to the Supreme. As it is stated in the first canto, second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam 1-7, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha. When Vasudeva, the all-pervading Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is served in completely pure devotion, detachment from the material world immediately begins. The purpose of Sankhya is to detach oneself from material contamination. This can be achieved simply by devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one is detached from the attraction of material prosperity, one can actually concentrate his mind upon the Supersoul. As long as the mind is distracted towards the material, there is no possibility of concentrating one's mind and intelligence upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his partial representation, Supersoul. In other words, one cannot concentrate one's mind and energy upon the Supreme unless one is detached from the material world. Following detachment from the material world, one can actually attain transcendental knowledge of the Absolute Truth. As long as one is entangled in sense enjoyment or material enjoyment, it is not possible to understand the Absolute Truth. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 18:54. One who is freed from material contamination is joyful and can enter into devotional service, and by devotional service he can be liberated. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, it is stated that one becomes joyful by discharging devotional service. In that joyful attitude, one can understand the science of God or Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, it is not possible. The analytical study of the elements of material nature and the concentration of the mind upon the Supersoul are the sum and substance of the Sankhya philosophical system. The perfection of this Sankhya yoga culminates in devotional service unto the Absolute Truth. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 26th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. So it's quite long, one of the longest chapters, probably, or it seems like there are many long chapters actually. So in continuing, chapter 27, which is entitled Understanding Material Nature. So it's still Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kapiladev, talking to his mother Devahuti. Text 1. The Personality of Godhead Kapila continued. When the living entity is thus unaffected by the modes of material nature, because he is unchanging and does not claim proprietorship, he remains apart from the reactions of the modes, although abiding in a material body, just as the sun remains aloof from its reflection on water. Purport. In the previous chapter, Lord Kapiladeva has concluded that simply by beginning the discharge of devotional service, one can attain detachment and transcendental knowledge for understanding the signs of God. Here the same principle is confirmed. A person who is detached from the modes of material nature remains just like the sun reflected on water. When the sun is reflected on water, the movement of the water, or the coolness or unsteadiness of the water, cannot affect the sun. Similarly, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha. When one engages fully in the activities of devotional service, Bhakti Yoga, he becomes just like the sun reflected on water. Although a devotee appears to be in the material world, actually he is in the transcendental world. As the reflection of the sun appears to be on the water, but is many millions of miles away from the water, so one engaged in the Bhakti Yoga process is nirguna, or unaffected by the qualities of material nature. Avikara means without change. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that each and every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and thus his eternal position is to cooperate or to dovetail his energy with the Supreme Lord. That is his unchanging position. As soon as he employs his energy and activities for sense gratification, this change of position is called vikara. Similarly, even in this material body, when he practices devotional service under the direction of the spiritual master, he comes to the position which is without change, because that is his natural duty. As stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, liberation means reinstatement in one's original position. The original position is one of rendering service to the Lord, bhakti yogena and bhaktya, so two words. When one becomes detached from material attraction and engages fully in devotional service, that is changelessness. Akatritvat means not doing anything for sense gratification. When one does something at his own risk, there is a sense of proprietorship and therefore a reaction. But when does everything for Krishna, there is no proprietorship over the activities. By changelessness and by not claiming the proprietorship of activities, one can immediately situate himself in the transcendental position in which one is not touched by the modes of material nature, just as the reflection of the sun is unaffected by the water. Text 2. When the soul is under the spell of material nature and false ego, identifying his body as the self, he becomes absorbed in material activities. And by the influence of false ego, he thinks that he is the proprietor of everything. Purport. Actually, the conditioned soul is forced to act under the pressure of the modes of material nature. The living entity has no independence. When he is under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is free. But when, under the impression that he is satisfying his senses, he engages in sense gratificatory activities, he is under the spell. He is actually under the spell of material nature. In Bhagavad Gita it is said, Prakrite kriyamanani. One acts according to the particular modes of nature he has acquired. Guna refers to the qualities of nature. He is under the qualities of nature, but he falsely thinks that he is the proprietor. This false sense of proprietorship can be avoided simply by engaging oneself in devotional service under the direction of the Supreme Lord or his bona fide representative. Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita was trying to accept for himself the responsibility for killing his grandfather and teacher in the fight, but he became freed from that proprietorship of action when he acted under the direction of Krishna. He fought, but he was actually freed from the reactions of fighting, although in the beginning, when he was non-violent, unwilling to fight, the entire responsibility was upon him. That is the difference between liberation and conditioning. A conditioned soul may be very good and act in the mode of goodness, but still he is conditioned under the spell of material nature. A devotee, however, acts completely under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Thus, his actions may not appear to be of very high quality to the common man, but the devotee has no responsibility. Very interesting. Text 3. The conditioned soul, therefore, transmigrates into different species of life, higher and lower, because of his association with the modes of material nature. Unless he is relieved of material activities, he has to accept this position because of his faulty work. Purport. Here the word karma doshai means by faulty actions. This refers to any activity, good or bad, performed in this material world. They are all contaminated, faulty actions because of material association. The foolish conditioned soul may think that he is offering charity by opening hospitals for material benefit, or by opening an educational institution for material education, but he does not know that all such work is also faulty, because it will not give him relief from the process of transmigration from one body to another. It is clearly stated here, Sat Asan Mishra Yonishu. This means that one may take birth in a very high family, or he may take his birth in higher planets among the demigods for his so-called pious activities in the material world. But this work is also faulty because it does not give liberation. To take birth in a nice place or a high family does not mean that one avoids undergoing the material tribulations, the pangs of birth, death, old age, and disease. A conditioned soul under the spell of material nature cannot understand that any action he performs for sense gratification is faulty, and that only his activities in devotional service to the Lord can give him release from the reaction of faulty activities. Because he does not cease such faulty activities, he has to change to different bodies, some high and some low. That is called samsara padavim, which means this material world from which there is no release. One who desires material liberation has to turn his activities to devotional service. There is no alternative. Sorry to tell you that. There's no alternative. It's text 4. Actually, a living entity is transcendental to material existence, but because of his mentality of lording it over material nature, his material existential condition does not cease, and just as in a dream, he is affected by all sorts of disadvantages. Purport. The example of a dream is very appropriate. Due to different mental conditions, in dreams we are put into advantageous and disadvantageous positions. Similarly, the spirit soul has nothing to do with this material nature, but because of his mentality of lording it over, he is put into the position of conditional existence. Conditional existence is described here as dhyayato vishayan asya. Vishaya means an object of enjoyment. As long as one continues to think that he can enjoy material advantages, he is in conditioned life. But as soon as he comes to his senses, he develops the knowledge that he is not the enjoyer, for the only enjoyer is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 5.29, he is the beneficiary of all the results of sacrifices and penances, Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam, and he is the proprietor of all the three worlds, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He is the actual friend of all living entities, but instead of leaving proprietorship, enjoyment, and the actual position as the friend of all living entities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we claim that we are the proprietors, the enjoyers, and the friends. We perform philanthropic work, thinking that we are the friends of human society. Someone may proclaim himself to be a very good national worker, the best friend of the people and of the country, but actually he cannot be the greatest friend of everyone. The only friend is Krishna. One should try to raise the consciousness of the conditioned soul to the platform of understanding that Krishna is his actual friend. If one makes friendship with Krishna, one will never be cheated and he will get all help needed. Arousing this consciousness of the conditioned soul is the greatest service, not posing oneself as a great friend of another living entity. The power of friendship is limited. Although one claims to be a friend, he cannot be a friend unlimitedly. There are an unlimited number of living entities, and our resources are limited. Therefore, we cannot be of any real benefit to the people in general. The best service to the people in general is to awaken them to Krishna consciousness so that they may know that the Supreme Enjoyer, the Supreme Proprietor, and the Supreme Friend is Krishna. Then this illusory dream of lording it over material nature will vanish. Text 5. It is the duty of every conditioned soul to engage his polluted consciousness, which is now attached to material enjoyment, in very serious devotional service with detachment. Thus his mind and consciousness will be under full control. Purport. The process of liberation is very nicely explained in this verse. The cause of one's becoming conditioned by material nature is his thinking himself the enjoyer, the proprietor, or the friend of all living entities. This false thinking is a result of contemplation on sense enjoyment. When one thinks that he is the best friend to his countrymen, to society, or to humanity, and he engages in various nationalistic, philanthropic, and altruistic activities, all that is just so much concentration on sense gratification. The so-called national leader or humanist does not serve everyone. He serves his senses only. That is the fact. But the conditioned soul cannot understand this because he is bewildered by the spell of material nature. It is therefore recommended in this verse that one engage very seriously in the devotional service of the Lord. This means that one should not think that he is the proprietor, benefactor, friend, or enjoyer. He should always be cognizant that the real enjoyer is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the basic principle of Bhakti Yoga. One must be firmly convinced of these three principles. One should always think that Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the friend. Not only should he understand these principles himself, but he should try to convince others and propagate Krishna consciousness. As soon as one engages in such serious devotional service to the Lord, naturally the propensity to falsely claim lordship over material nature disappears. That detachment is called vairagya. Instead of being absorbed in so-called material lordship, one engages in Krishna consciousness. That is control of consciousness. The yoga process necessitates controlling the senses. Yoga indriya samyamaha. Since the senses are always active, their activities should be engaged in devotional service. One cannot stop their activities. If one wants to artificially stop the activities of the senses, his attempts will be a failure. Even the great yogi Vishwamitra, who was trying to control his senses by the yoga process, fell victim to the beauty of Menaka. There are many such instances. Unless one's mind and consciousness are fully engaged in devotional service, there is always the opportunity for the mind to become occupied with desires for sense gratification. One particular point mentioned in this verse is very significant. It is said here, prasaktam asatam pathi. The mind is always attracted by asat, the temporary, material existence. Because we have been associated with material nature since time immemorial, we have become accustomed to our attachment to this temporary material nature. The mind has to be fixed at the eternal lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Savai mana Krishna padara vindayaho. One has to fix the mind at the lotus feet of Krishna, then everything will be very nice. Thus the seriousness of Bhakti Yoga is stressed in this verse. Text 6. One has to become faithful by practicing the controlling process of the yoga system and must elevate himself to the platform of unalloyed devotional service by chanting and hearing about me. Purport. Yoga is practiced in 8 different stages: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Yama and niyama mean practicing the controlling process by following strict regulations, and asana refers to the sitting postures. These help raise one to the standard of faithfulness in devotional service. The practice of yoga by physical exercise is not the ultimate goal. The real end is to concentrate and to control the mind and train oneself to be situated in faithful devotional service. Bhavena or bhava is a very important factor in the practice of yoga or in any spiritual process. Bhava is explained in Bhagavad Gita 10.8. Buddha bhava samanvitaha. One should be absorbed in the thought of love of Krishna. When one knows that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the source of everything and that everything emanates from him, aham sarvasya prabhava, then one understands the Vedanta aphorism Janmadi asya yataha, the original source of everything, and then he can become absorbed in bhava, or the preliminary stage of love of Godhead. Rupa Goswami explains very nicely in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu how this bhava or preliminary stage of love of God is achieved. He states that one first of all has to become faithful. Shraddhayanvitaha. Faith is attained by controlling the senses, either by yoga practice, following the rules and regulations, and practicing the sitting postures, or by engaging directly in bhakti yoga, as recommended in the previous verse. Of the 9 different items of bhakti yoga, the first and foremost is to chant and hear about the Lord. That is also mentioned here. Mat katha shravanena cha. One may come to the standard of faithfulness by following the rules and regulations of the yoga system, and the same goal can be achieved simply by chanting and hearing about the transcendental activities of the Lord. The word cha is significant. Bhakti yoga is direct and the other process is indirect. But even if the indirect process is taken, there is no success unless one comes fully to the direct process of hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. Therefore, the word satyena is used here. In this connection, Swami Sridhar comments that satyena means nishkapatena, without duplicity. The impersonalists are full of duplicity. Sometimes they pretend to execute devotional service, but their ultimate idea is to become one with the Supreme. This is duplicity, kapata. The Bhagavatam does not allow this duplicity. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is clearly stated, Paramo nirmat saranam. This treatise, Srimad Bhagavatam, is meant for those who are completely free from envy. The same point is again stressed here. Unless one is completely faithful to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engages himself in the process of hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, there is no possibility for liberation. Just one moment. You have any comments? Just making some notes. Okay, then, so text 7. In executing devotional service, one has to see every living entity equally, without enmity towards anyone, yet without intimate connections with anyone. One has to observe celibacy, be grave, and execute his eternal activities. offering the results to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. A devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead who seriously engages in devotional service is equal to all living entities. There are various species of living entities, but a devotee does not see the outward covering. He sees the inner soul inhabiting the body. Because each and every soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he does not see any difference. That is the vision of a learned devotee. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, a devotee or learned sage does not see any difference between a learned brahmana, a dog, an elephant, or a cow, because he sees that the body is the outer covering only, and that the soul is actually part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. A devotee has no enmity towards any living entity, but that does not mean that he mixes with everyone. That is prohibited. Aprasangataha means not to be in intimate touch with everyone. A devotee is concerned with his execution of devotional service, and he should therefore mix with devotees only in order to advance his objective. He has no business mixing with others, for although he does not see anyone as his enemy, his dealings are only with persons who engage in devotional service. A devotee should observe the vow of celibacy. Celibacy does not necessitate that one be absolutely free from sex life. Satisfaction with one's wife is permitted also under the vow of celibacy. The best policy is to avoid sex life altogether. That is preferable. Otherwise, a devotee can get married under religious principles and live peacefully with a wife. A devotee should not speak needlessly. A serious devotee has no time to speak of nonsense. He is always busy in Krishna consciousness. Whenever he speaks about Krishna. Mauna means silence. Silence does not mean that one should not speak at all, but that he should not speak of nonsense. He should be very enthusiastic in speaking about Krishna. Another important item described here is svadharmena, or being exclusively occupied in one's eternal occupation, which is to act as the eternal servitor of the Lord, or to act in Krishna consciousness. The next word, Bali Iyasa, means offering the results of all activities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A devotee does not act on his personal account for sense gratification. Whatever he earns, whatever he eats, and whatever he does, he offers for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 8. For his income, a devotee should be satisfied with what he earns without great difficulty. He should not eat more than what is necessary. He should live in a secluded place and always be thoughtful, peaceful, friendly, compassionate, and self-realized. Purport. Everyone who has accepted a material body must maintain the necessities of the body by acting or earning some livelihood. A devotee should only work for such income as is absolutely necessary. He should be satisfied always with such income, and should not endeavor to earn more or more simply to accumulate the unnecessary. A person in the conditioned state who has no money is always found working very hard to earn some with the object of lording it over material nature. Kapila Deva instructs that we should not endeavor hard for things which may come automatically without extraneous labor. The exact word used in this connection, yadrichaya, means that every living entity has a predestined happiness and distress in his present body. This is called the law of karma. It is not possible that simply by endeavoring to accumulate more money a person will be able to do so. Otherwise, almost everyone would be on the same level of wealth. In reality, everyone is earning and acquiring according to his predestined karma. According to the Bhagavatam conclusion, we are sometimes faced with dangerous or miserable conditions without endeavoring for them, and similarly we may have prosperous conditions without endeavoring for them. We are advised to let these things come as predestined. We should engage our valuable time in prosecuting Krishna consciousness. In other words, one should be satisfied by his natural condition. If by predestination. One is put into a certain condition of life which is not very prosperous in comparison to another's position. One should not be disturbed. He should simply try to utilize his valuable time to advance in Krishna consciousness. Advancement in Krishna consciousness does not depend on any materially prosperous or distressed condition. It is free from the conditions imposed by material life. A very poor man can execute Krishna consciousness as effectively as a very rich man. One should therefore be very satisfied with his position as offered by the Lord. Another word here is mita bhuk. This means that one should eat only as much as necessary to maintain the body and soul together. One should not be gluttonous to satisfy the tongue. Grains, fruits, milk, and similar foods are allotted for human consumption. One should not be excessively eager to satisfy the tongue and eat that which is not meant for humanity. Particularly, a devotee should eat only prasada or food which is offered to the personality of Godhead. His position is to accept the remnants of those foodstuffs. Innocent foods like grains, vegetable fruits, flowers, and milk preparations are offered to the Lord, and therefore there is no scope for offering foods which are in the modes of passion and ignorance. A devotee should not be greedy. It is also recommended that a devotee should be muni, or thoughtful. He should always think of Krishna and how to render better service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That should be his only anxiety. As a materialist is always thoughtful about improving his material condition, a devotee's thoughts should always be engaged in improving his condition in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, he should be a muni. The next item recommended is that a devotee should live in a secluded place. Generally, a common man is interested in pounds, shillings, and pence, or materialistic advancement in life, which is unnecessary for a devotee. A devotee should select a place of residence where everyone is interested in devotional service. Generally, therefore, a devotee goes to a sacred place of pilgrimage where devotees live. It is recommended that he live in a place where there is no large number of ordinary men. It is very important to live in a secluded place, vivikta sharana. The next item is shanta, or peacefulness. The devotee should not be agitated. He should be satisfied with his natural income, eat only as much as he needs to keep his health, live in a secluded place, and always remain peaceful. Peace of mind is necessary for prosecuting Krishna consciousness. The next item is maitra, friendliness. A devotee should be friendly to everyone, but his intimate friendship should be with devotees only. With others, he should be official. He may say, "Yes, sir, what you say is all right," but he is not intimate with them. A devotee should, however, have compassion for persons who are innocent, who are neither atheistic nor very much advanced in spiritual realization. A devotee should be compassionate towards them and instruct them as far as possible in making advancement in Krishna consciousness. A devotee should always remain atmavan, or situated in his spiritual position. He should not forget that his main concern is to make advancement in spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness, and he should not ignorantly identify himself with the body or the mind. Atma means the body or the mind, but here the word atmavan especially means that one should be self-possessed. He should always remain in the pure consciousness that he is spirit soul and not the material body or the mind. That will make him progress confidently in Krishna consciousness. Text 9. So 327.9. One's seeing power should be increased through knowledge of spirit and matter, and one should not unnecessarily identify himself with the body and thus become attracted by bodily relationships. Purport. The conditioned souls are eager to identify with the body and consider that the body is myself and that anything in relationship with the body or possessions of the body is mine. In Sanskrit, this is called aham mamata, and it is the root cause of all conditional life. A person should see things as the combination of matter and spirit. He should distinguish between the nature of matter and the nature of spirit, and his real identification should be with spirit, not with matter. By this knowledge, one should avoid the false bodily concept of life. Dina, would you like to read since you're here? Would you like to read? Just let it. Okay, if you want. Text 10. One should be situated in a transcendental position beyond the stages of material consciousness and should be aloof from all other conceptions of life. Thus, realizing freedom from false ego, one should see his own self just as he sees the sun in the sky. Purport. Consciousness acts in 3 stages under the material conception of life. When we are awake, consciousness acts in a particular way. When we are asleep, it acts in a different way. And when we are in deep sleep, consciousness acts in a still another way. To become Krishna conscious, one has to become transcendental to these 3 stages of consciousness. Our present consciousness should be freed from all perceptions of life other than consciousness of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is called Duri Bhutanya Darshanaha, which means that when one attains perfect Krishna consciousness, he does not see anything but Krishna. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that the perfect devotee may see many movable and immovable objects, but in everything he sees that the energy of Krishna is acting. As soon as he remembers the energy of Krishna, he immediately remembers Krishna in his personal form. Therefore, in all his observations, he sees Krishna only. In the Brahma Samhita 5.38, it is stated that when one's eyes are smeared with love of Krishna, Primanjana Churita, he always sees Krishna outside and inside. This is confirmed here. One should be freed from all other vision, and in that way he is freed from the false egoistic identification and sees himself as the eternal servitor of the Lord. Chakshushevarkam. As we can see the sun without a doubt, one who is fully developed in Krishna consciousness sees Krishna and his energy. By this vision, one becomes Atmadrik, or self-realized. When the false ego of identifying the body with the self is removed, actual vision of life is perceivable. The senses, therefore, also become purified. Real service of the Lord begins when the senses are purified. One does not have to stop the activities of the senses, but the false ego of identifying with the body has to be removed. Then the senses automatically become purified, and with purified senses one can actually discharge devotional service. Yes. Text 11. A liberated soul realizes the absolute personality of Godhead, who is transcendental and who is manifest as a reflection even in the false ego. He is the support of the material cause, and he enters into everything. He is absolute, one without a second, and he is the eyes of the illusory energy. Purport. A pure devotee can see the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in everything materially manifested. He is present there only as a reflection, but a pure devotee can realize that in the darkness of material illusion, the only light is the Supreme Lord, who is its support. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that the background of the material manifestation is Lord Krishna. And as confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Krishna is the cause of all causes. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that the Supreme Lord, by his partial or plenary expansion, is present not only within this universe and each and every universe, but in every atom, although he is one without a second. The word advayam, without a second, which is used in this verse, indicates that although the Supreme Personality of Godhead is represented in everything, including the atoms, he is not divided. His presence in everything is explained in the next verse. So that's verse 12. The presence of the Supreme Lord can be realized just as the sun is realized first as a reflection on water, and again as a second reflection on the wall of a room, although the sun itself is situated in the sky. Purport. The example given herewith is perfect. The sun is situated in the sky, far, far away from the surface of the earth, but its reflection can be seen in a pot of water in a corner of a room. The room is dark and the sun is far away in the sky, but the sun's reflection on the water illuminates the darkness of the room. A pure devotee can realize the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in everything by the reflection of his energy. In the Vishnu Purana, it is stated that as the presence of fire is understood by heat and light, so the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although one without the second, is perceived everywhere by the diffusion of his different energies. It is confirmed in the Ishopanishad that the presence of the Lord is perceived everywhere by the liberated soul, just as the sunshine and the reflection can be perceived everywhere, although the sun is situated far away from the surface of the globe. Text 13. The self-realized soul is thus reflected first in the threefold ego and then in the body, senses, and mind. Purport. The conditioned soul thinks, I am this body. But the liberated soul thinks, I am not this body. I am spirit soul. This I am is called ego, or identification of the self. I am this body, or everything in relationship to this body is mine, is called false ego. But when one is self-realized and thinks that he is an eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord, that identification is real ego. One conception is in the darkness of the threefold qualities of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, and the other is in the pure state of goodness, called Shuddha Sattva, or Vasudeva. When we say that we give up our ego, this means that we give up our false ego, but real ego is always present. When one is reflected through the material contamination of the body and mind in false identification, he is in the conditional state. But when he is reflected in the pure stage, he is called liberated. The identification of oneself with one's material possessions in the conditional stage must be purified, and one must identify himself in relationship with the Supreme Lord. In the conditioned state, one accepts everything as an object of sense gratification, and in the liberated state, one accepts everything for the service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness, devotional service, is the actual liberated stage of a living entity. Otherwise, both accepting and rejecting on the material platform or in voidness or impersonalism are imperfect conditions for the pure soul. By the understanding of the pure soul called Sattvadrik, one can see everything as a reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A concrete example can be given in this connection. A conditioned soul sees a very beautiful rose, and he thinks that the nice aromatic flower should be used for his own sense gratification. This is one kind of vision. A liberated soul, however, sees the same flower as a reflection of the Supreme Lord. He thinks, this beautiful flower is made possible by the superior energy of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, it belongs to the Supreme Lord and should be utilized in his service. These are two kinds of vision. The conditioned soul sees the flower for his own enjoyment, and the devotee sees the flower as an object to be used in the service of the Lord. In the same way, one can see the reflection of the Supreme Lord in one's own senses, mind and body, in everything. With that correct vision, one can engage everything in the service of the Lord. It is stated in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that one who has engaged everything, his vital energy, his wealth, his intelligence, and his words, in the service of the Lord, or who desires to engage all this in the service of the Lord, no matter how he is situated, is to be considered a liberated soul, or Satyadrik. Such a man has understood things as they are. Text 14. Although a devotee appears to be merged in 5 material elements, the objects of material enjoyment, the material senses, and material mind and intelligence, he is understood to be awake and to be freed from the false ego. Purport. The explanation by Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of how a person can be liberated even in this body is more elaborately explained in this verse. The living entity who has become Satyadrik, who realizes his position in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, may remain apparently merged in the 5 elements of matter, the 5 material sense objects, the 10 senses, and the mind and intelligence. But still he is considered to be awake and to be freed from the reaction of false ego. Here the word lina is very significant. The Mayavadi philosophers recommend merging in the impersonal effulgence of Brahman. That is their ultimate goal or destination. That merging is also mentioned here. But in spite of merging, one can keep his individuality. The example given by Jiva Goswami is that a green bird that enters a green tree appears to merge in the color of greenness, but actually the bird does not lose its individuality. Similarly, a living entity merged either in the material nature or in the spiritual nature does not give up his individuality. Real individuality is to understand oneself to be the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. This information is received from the mouth of Lord Chaitanya. He said clearly, upon the inquiry of Sanatana Goswami, that a living entity is the servitor of Krishna eternally. Krishna also confirms in Bhagavad Gita that the living entity is eternally his part and parcel. The part and parcel is meant to serve the whole. This is individuality. It is so even in this material existence when the living entity apparently merges in matter. His gross body is made up of 5 elements. His subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, false ego, and contaminated consciousness. And he has 5 active senses and 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. In this way, he merges in matter. But even while merged into 24 elements of matter, he can keep his individuality as the eternal servitor of the Lord. Either in the spiritual nature or in the material nature, such a servitor is to be considered a liberated soul. That is the explanation of the authorities, and it is confirmed in this verse. So we're going to read 15, the last one, the last verse for today. The living entity can vividly feel his existence as the seer, but because of the disappearance of the ego during the state of deep sleep, he falsely takes himself to be lost, like a man who has lost his fortune and feels distressed, thinking himself to be lost. Purport. Only in ignorance does the living entity think that he is lost. If by attainment of knowledge he comes to the real position of his eternal existence, he knows that he is not lost. An appropriate example is mentioned herein. Nashta vita ivaturaha. A person who has lost a great sum of money may think that he is lost, but actually he is not lost. Only his money is lost. But due to his absorption in the money or identification with the money, he thinks that he is lost. Similarly, when we falsely identify with matter as our field of activities, we think that we are lost, although actually we are not. As soon as a person is awakened to the pure knowledge of understanding that he is an eternal servitor of the Lord, his own real position is revived. A living entity can never be lost. When one forgets his identity in deep sleep, he becomes absorbed in dreams, and he may think himself a different person or may think himself lost. But actually his identity is intact. This concept of being lost is due to false ego, and it continues as long as one is not awakened to the sense of his existence as an eternal servitor of the Lord. The Mayavadi philosophers' concept of becoming one with the Supreme Lord is another symptom of being lost in false ego. One may falsely claim that he is the Supreme Lord, but actually he is not. This is the last snare of Maya's influence upon the living entity. To think oneself equal with the Supreme Lord, or to think oneself to be the Supreme Lord himself, is also due to false ego. So we end today's reading here. We'll continue Wednesday, next week, 6:30, same place, for another hour, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.